News of the Times. The Southend Seducer. The murder of Florence Dennis in 1894. On the evening of the 25th of June 1894, in a quiet field near Prittlewell, a young man walking home noticed something unusual in the grass. A single glove, lying beside a narrow brook, and a few yards further on, he found blood. And at the bottom of the shallow stream lay the body of 23-year-old Florence Dennis. She had been shot at close range. The hair around the wound was singed, the skin blackened by powder. The bullet had entered just above her left ear and lodged deep within her brain. There was no weapon. Within hours, local police telegraphed to Scotland Yard. What began as a lonely death in an Essex field would quickly become a case of national attention involving forged identities, missing dock funds, secret lodgings in Mitcham, and a man living 3 separate lives. Tonight we examine the case of the Southend Seducer and the Scotland Yard investigation that brought him to the gallows. And in our further particulars tonight, we step into the Westminster Police Court, where a clairvoyant, a civil engineer, and a crystal ball, and an inconvenient baby combined to provide the public with one of the most entertaining mornings justice could offer. So, settle in and allow yourself to step back into the world of 1894, a world of telegrams and railway platforms, crystal balls, and crowded courtrooms, where reputation was everything and scandal travelled quickly. From the London Evening Standard, the 26th of June 1894, supposed murder at Southend. The remains of Florence Dennis, 23, were found near Prittlewell last night by a man named Rush, who was returning from his work. The body was lying partially in a small brook. There was a gunshot wound by the left ear. No weapon was found. The girl, who has been living for some time at Wellesley Road, Southend-on-Sea, had been, it is stated, betrayed by her lover, and her condition caused her the greatest distress. She went out on Sunday night to meet him, he having, it is alleged, promised to marry her and make arrangements that night for the wedding. Nothing further was heard of her until her dead body was found. Another account. A young gentleman named Rush, while walking through Prittlewell, a secluded spot about a mile from Southend, saw at the bottom of a sloping road leading to Victoria Avenue a woman's glove. It lay in the field near the brook, and close to it were what on examination proved to be bloodstains. Proceeding to the bank, Mr. Rush was horrified to find the body of a young woman in the bed of the stream. Her face was concealed by her hat, but it didn't take long to see that there was a wound just above the left ear, and it was clear that she was dead. He at once communicated the facts to the police at Southend. The body was that of a rather short, good-looking girl. The wound in the head was found to have been caused by a revolver shot, and the discoloration and singeing of the hair go to prove that the muzzle must have been thrust very close to the head when the trigger was pressed. There was very little water in the brook. On examining the ground nearby, it was clearly established that the girl was attacked about 8 feet from the bank of the stream, for blood marks were visible, and there was an unbroken track of them down to the water. From this it appears that the crime was perpetrated on the brow of the hill, and the body was either dragged down to the ditch or the unhappy victim staggered there herself. A very vigilant search of the whole neighbourhood by the police failed to reveal any trace of the revolver. The body has been removed to the Spread Eagle Inn in Prittlewell, where the Essex coroner will investigate the crime tomorrow. If you'd like to continue this investigation and unlock the full episode, you'll find it waiting for you on Patreon. Membership gives you access to over 800 historical documentaries, all ad-free for £5 a month. In October 1892, the prisoner met Miss Kempton at Gloucester Road Station and represented himself to her as Edgar Benson, a single man and commercial traveller. Those statements were untrue. Under that name he maintained correspondence from Mile End Road and in due course lived with her as her husband. When pressed for marriage, he produced a document purporting to be a certificate of marriage at Kensington, which would later be shown to be false. Throughout 1893 and into the present year, he divided his time between his lawful home and his assumed household. While at Hallingbury, he displayed a pistol, stating that he carried it for protection. Meanwhile, his financial position had deteriorated. Letters written to Miss Kempton spoke of pressing debts and urgent necessity. He described himself as dead broke. In June 1894, Florence Dennis returned to Southend. Telegrams passed between her and the prisoner. He informed Miss Kempton that he was obliged to travel to Canterbury on important business, yet evidence would show that he travelled instead toward Southend. On the Saturday evening, Florence went out to meet him and returned home dissatisfied. A further appointment was arranged for the Sunday night. On that evening, she was seen in his company near the Great Eastern Railway Station, and later walked towards the fields at Prittlewell. In the early hours of the morning, he was observed alone at Benfleet. The following day, when questioned by telegram, he denied having seen Florence for many months. He left his employment and he didn't return. When arrested at Mitcham, he had recently purchased new clothing and was found in possession of money. The bullet recovered from Florence Dennis's head would, the prosecution contended, correspond with ammunition previously connected to the prisoner. Thus the Crown proposed to establish not only opportunity, but motive, preparation, deception, and flight. Inspector Baker described the arrest at Mitcham and the search of the premises. Letters signed Edgar were recovered, together with a document purporting to be a marriage certificate. At the Stepney address, a blank form of such a certificate was also discovered. When apprehended, the prisoner made several remarks, including the curious observation that Mrs. Ayres knew more about this than he did. Evidence was then given that £159 was missing from the docks, and a separate warrant for theft had been obtained. Witnesses placed the prisoner in the vicinity of Prittlewell on the Sunday night. One man identified him as the individual seen walking with Florence Dennis shortly before her death. Under cross-examination, he admitted that he had not seen the man's face clearly, relying instead upon dress and a manner of walking. At the conclusion of the day's proceedings, the case was adjourned. Throughout the proceedings, Reed maintained a composed and confident bearing. From the dock he continued to assert that he had not seen Florence Dennis for some 18 months prior to her death, and that he had no knowledge of her condition. While in custody during the trial, he wrote several letters, aware that they would be subject to official scrutiny. In these communications, he repeated the same position, denying recent association with Florence and disavowing responsibility for her circumstances. Thus, even as the prosecution laid out its sequence of meetings, telegrams, and movements, Reed adhered steadily to his original claim. It was upon that denial that the defence would largely rest. From the Illustrated Police News, the 3rd of November, 1894, Reed in prison. James Canham Reed, the man charged with the murder of Florence Dennis in Southend, is reportedly to have slightly suffered in health. The long maintenance of a nonchalant manner while Reed is at Chelmsford waiting his trial has considerably shaken his nervous system, and during the last few days he has suffered from nervous excitement following upon sleepless nights. He has written to a friend stating that he has been anticipating news to the effect that the grand jury would decide to find no bill. Reed referred to his sleeplessness as the natural result of the time and attention he is devoting to his defence. In this task he has spent on an average some 3 or 4 hours daily, and the mental strain has certainly told upon him. In another letter he reiterates his protestation of innocence and says, "I'm confident of an acquittal, for as I've said before and repeat now, I have not seen Florence Dennis for 18 or 20 months, and was as much surprised as anyone at her death." 70 witnesses will be called for the prosecution, and it is understood that Reed will call 3 or 4 witnesses, but they will not only asked to speak to character. Notwithstanding the prisoner's continued assurance of innocence, the evidence as presented by the court was regarded by many observers as compelling. After hearing the summing up and retiring for a brief deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict of guilty. The announcement was received in a courtroom already charged with expectation. In the days that followed, the metropolitan press treated the result as the fitting conclusion to a case marked by deception, divided loyalties, and calculated concealment. Commentators spoke of the exposure of a double life and the tragic consequences that had followed. For the public, long attentive to each development, the verdict brought the matter to its formal close. From the Illustrated Police News, 24th of November 1894. Sentence. The mystery of the revolting murder of Florence Dennis has been solved. She was shot by James Cannon Reed on June the 24th at Prittlewell near Southend. That was the verdict of the jury, and the judge added that, in his opinion, no person who has been in court to hear the evidence could have any doubt upon it, and in due form the sentence of death was passed on the convict. It was the conclusion everyone expected, for the damning chain of evidence was wound round Reed, link by link, until he stood helpless and convicted. The principal features of this notorious trial are so well known that only a brief sketch of the facts are now necessary. The body of Florence Dennis was found near a secluded footpath through some fields at Prittlewell, and the cause of death undoubtedly was a bullet wound in the head. The theory of suicide was untenable because of the reason that no pistol was found near the body. It was true that the girl had been wronged and was about to become a mother, but there was no reason to suppose she contemplated self-destruction. She went out the fateful Sunday evening for a walk and was never seen again alive. That she was murdered by someone was the only inference to be drawn. From the discovery of the poor girl's body, the question immediately arose, whose interest was it to get rid of her? The convict Reed was at once suspected because there was no reason to suppose that he had immoral relations with the girl. Mrs. Aris, the dead girl's sister who lived at Southend, telegraphed to Reed at the docks to know where her sister was. Immediately Reed received this telegram, he left his employment and never came back to it, which was an extraordinary thing for an innocent man to do. No doubt that he had been embezzling money at the docks, but it was extraordinary he should choose the day he received the telegram asking for the whereabouts of Florence Dennis for his flight to the house at Mitcham, where, under the name of Benson, he was living as the supposed husband of a Miss Kempton, another of the victims of his criminal lust. Several witnesses deposed to have seen him at Southend on the day of the crime, and a policeman encountered and spoke to him at Benfleet the next day on his way to London, and it was also proved that he was possessed of a revolver firing a bullet similar to that which was the cause of death of Florence Dennis. No one witness for the defence was called, although the least bit of evidence calculated to throw doubt upon the evidence of the witnesses who swore to having seen him at Prittlewell might have saved him. But he was absolutely unable to give the slightest clue to his movements during the time immediately before and after the murder, and from the character of the man, it is without doubt that no matter what he had been doing, however criminal or wicked, other than the murder of Florence Dennis, he would have told it to his solicitor to save himself from hanging. For as Mr. Lockwood put it, Reed was hardly a man to save any woman's honour or reputation if his interest required the sacrifice. With these positive indictments of guilt in view, it is impossible to think that Reed was not guilty. It is a grim story of brutal desire, producing in a man such utter hardness of nature that he did not even shrink from murder as a way of escape from the difficulties which his vices created, and there will be none to pity and few to think that the punishment in store for him is more than he richly deserves. So the case concluded as the jury had determined. The judge, in passing sentence, spoke with the confidence of a court persuaded that the chain of circumstances admitted of no reasonable doubt. The press, for its part, treated the verdict as the inevitable unmasking of a double life and the exposure of calculated deceit. James Cannon Reed was executed at Chelmsford Prison on the 20th of November 1894. It was reported that his lawful wife visited him during his confinement and expressed forgiveness towards him before his death. Beyond that, little more was recorded of her. To contemporaries the matter seems settled, yet what remains more than a century later is not the fervour of the commentary, but the structure of the evidence, the telegrams, the divided households, the false certificate, the missing funds, the revolver, the walk across the fields at Prittlewell. Florence Dennis was 23 years of age. Her life and that of her unborn child ended beside a quiet brook in Essex. The consequence of that June evening reached outward into two households, into the columns of the London press, and ultimately to the scaffold. Such was the judgment of the court in 1894. Such is the record that remains. Further particulars. If one wished to be entertained in late Victorian London and had no pressing employment to attend to, one did not necessarily require the theatre. One could simply attend the magistrates' court. There, for the modest price of patience and a reasonably sturdy constitution, the public might enjoy seduction, indignation, moral posturing, perjury, handwriting comparisons, and, on especially fortunate mornings, a clairvoyant with a crystal ball. In November of 1894, the Westminster Police Court provided just such a spectacle. The case concerned an affiliation of summons, a civil engineer, a former servant, and a child named Ethel. Also included was a lady fortune teller who, although apparently able to see the future, had been quite unable to foresee the present difficulty. The court was crowded, the laughter frequent, and the revelations remarkable. From the Illustrated Police News, the 3rd of November, 1894. Extraordinary case. At the Westminster Police Court on Saturday before Mr. Shale, some remarkable revelations were made in the course of the hearing of an affiliation summons against Mr. Edward Howarth, a civil engineer of Chelsea, who was proceeded against by his late servant Louisa Johnson, in respect of a child named Ethel, born on the 1st of November 1892. The complainant, a smart-looking girl, said that in April 1891 she entered the service of Mrs. Howarth, a lady carrying on an extensive business as a fortune-teller and clairvoyant. Mrs. Howarth had a brass plate on the door with her name on it, and was consulted every day by well-dressed people, many of them being ladies who came in carriages. She told fortunes with the aid of a crystal ball, cards, etc., and it was on some of these occasions when she was so engaged that the defendant, who was in the kitchen, called witness from the scullery and acted in an improper way. On other occasions, Mr. Howarth went into her bedroom and stayed with her. His wife was away on a visit to Yarmouth at the time. Prosecution remarked that as a clairvoyant, she ought to have known and seen all of these things. Loud laughter. Witness went on to say that these occurrences went on during the early part of 1891 and were continued till July, after she found herself pregnant. In the preceding April, she had informed the defendant as to her condition, and he gave her pills and medicine. She produced one of the boxes of pills, which she never took. In July, she had to tell Mrs. Howarth the position of affairs, and in consequence, she had to leave at once. From the time of the birth of the child in November 1891 till August last, she regularly received postal orders either from a Mr. or Mrs. Howarth, accompanied by letters which she put in. Mr. Dutton, solicitor for the girl, put in several letters commencing "Dear Louisa" and referring to the enclosure of money. In 2 instances, regret was expressed that the amount was not larger, and in one, the girl was wished a pleasant Christmas and a prosperous New Year. Laughter. Complainant said that she had often seen her master write unquestionably all the letters and envelopes or in his handwriting, so he had not signed them. The letter wishing her the compliments of the season was sent to her at Christmas time, 1892. Latterly, the witness said, Mrs. Howarth had kept up the payments for the baby, and the following communications, among others, were in her handwriting. One of the letters stated, Mrs. Howarth would like to know if you're aware that Mr. Howarth has been put out of work since Friday after you left, and is still out of work. Mrs. Howarth seizes your letters and is not in position to help you very much. Another letter dated September 1893 says, when I read your letter which came last Saturday, I saw the mistake I had made and for not telling you that all the assistance you have had from me since you left has been out of charity, but for no other reason whatever. My husband has been out of employment for nearly 14 months. I am probably the only one who can try to help you. Would you please write to me if you have anything to say? I may tell you I open and read all letters. Mr. Dutton to the witness. Since August, the payments to you have ceased, and therefore you took these proceedings? Witness said, yes. In the absence of other direct corroboration, the defendant was called and examined. He swore that the letters which the girl had produced as his were not in his handwriting, as far as he knew. Pressed by the magistrate, who cautioned him, he swore positively they were not his, and gave categorical denials to the whole of the girl's story. He did not deny the authenticity of his wife's letters, but she had never told him that the complainant suggested that he was the father of her child. The first time he heard the charge against him was in September of the present year. By Mr. Dutton, witness denied giving the girl medicine or pills or going to a chemist whose name was put to him. He said he never divested himself of attire in the kitchen during his wife's hours of duty from 11 till 5 or at any time. Mr. Dutton. What are your wife's duties? Witness said, I decline to say. Mr. Dutton. Have you seen this magic crystal ball which your wife uses? Witness had protested against answering. He did not see the drift of the question. Laughter. He did not know what the ball was for and had never seen it used. Mr. Dutton. Do the ladies look into it after their futures are foretold? Witness excitedly said, What is this to do with it? Mr. Dutton, I will tell you your answers now, which go to credit seems about as true as the rest of your story. Tell me, what does your wife use this crystal ball for? Witness says, she has informed me that she uses it to hypnotize herself and then she sees things in it. Mr. Dutton, do you answer the door to the ladies who come in their carriages? Witness said, I have seen ladies come in carriages. Mr. Dutton, your wife carries on a large fortune-telling business. Witness said, no, not to my knowledge. Mr. Shield, I may tell you, I don't believe you. Witness said, she is clairvoyant. At this stage of the proceedings, the witness was put to a test. By direction of Mr. Dutton, with the approval of the magistrate, he was obliged to write on sheets of foolscap, both with quill and steel pens, the language of the letters which the girl had sworn were in his handwriting. Mr. Dutton, comparing these writings, said it left the matter beyond doubt. For the last time of asking, did he seriously and solemnly maintain on his oath that the communications to the defendant were not his? The defendant, I swear I never wrote and I never saw them before this case was in court. Mr. Dutton said, very well, this matter won't end here. Mrs. Howarth, a portly personage of mature age who had been out of court during her husband's examination, was called in to give evidence and described herself as an amanuensis, a copyrightist, and a corrector for the press. Mr. Dutton, anything else? Witness said, no, sir. Mr. Dutton, have you a large business? Witness said, fairly so. Mr. Dutton, what is your fee from each lady? Laughter. Witness, what do you mean? I've never fixed a fee. It's according to the work done. I'm paid by the folio. Loud laughter. But what is that to do with the case? I shall decline to answer your questions. I am your witness subpoenaed here, and these matters are irrelevant. Mr. Dutton, producing the letters which the girl had sworn were in the witness' hand, asked if she admitted the authorship. Witness, after much cross-examination, said the letters were hers, but the dates had been altered and added. Mr. Shield was proceeded to question her, asked to the documents, when she was interrupted. His worship, you may be very clever as a fortune teller, but I don't suppose you know in advance what I was going to ask you. Laughter. Witness went on to say that from the time of the complainant leaving her service in 1892 down to September of the present year, she never spoke to her husband about the girl's baby. If this objectionable method of cross-examination was continued, she would fall down in hysterics. She was sure she should. Loud laughter. The examination proceeded, and Mrs. Howarth said she had sent money to the girl out of charity, having always been a kind and indulgent mistress. Mr. Shield, your husband was out of employment. How can you send this money to the girl? Witness said, by my own means. She added that she could not say how much she had sent. When one did acts of pure generosity and charity, as she did, they were not accustomed to keeping a debit and credit amount. Mr. Dutton read various extracts from the letters in evidence and inquiring what she meant by them to a discharged servant. Witness said, I sent them from time to time to prevent my husband being annoyed. Mr. Shield, you just said it was charity. Cross-examined by Mr. Dutton and repeatedly protesting, she said that she did not have any lady customers, and gentlemen too. Perhaps the solicitor would like their names. Mr. Dutton, oh yes, a little more light on your business will do no harm. Witness said, Mr. Justice McCarthy MP, and there is the young lady who collaborates with him in some of his novels. Loud laughter. Mr. Dutton. Do tell Mr. McCarthy's fortunes with the crystal ball. Forecast his political horoscope. Roars of laughter. Witness with scorn. Sir, I consider that an impertinent question. More laughter. Mr. Dutton. But you are a fortune teller. Witness said no. The clairvoyant. To the magistrate. Will you tell me whether I am obliged to answer these questions? Will you advise me? I use the crystal ball for my own amusement and to gratify my friends. Mr. Dutton. But the ladies who drive up in their carriages pay you. Witness said, Sir, if they take up my time and use my room, they may make me a present. You would not expect them to take up my time without offering me something. Laughter. Mr. Dutton asked for an adjournment to get expert evidence asked to the defendant's handwriting. The magistrate allowed the application and all the letters being impounded by the court. And with that we leave the quiet brook at Prittlewell, the crowded court at Chelmsford, and the columns of the London press in the autumn of 1894. The papers have been folded, the verdict recorded, the scaffold dismantled. History as ever moves on. This has been News of the Times. I am Robin Coles, historian of telegrams, collector of railway timetables no one has asked for, an occasional student of Victorian moustache geometry. Until next time, our warmest wishes, and do mind where you agree to meet people on a Sunday evening.